Greetings, adventurers. It's me, Grumbles the Dwarf, and I'm back with a World of Warships replay this time. Fresh off the back of opening my Santa crates that I received as a CC, and also invested a reasonable sum of doubloons in for a few extras. Thank you to Wargaming for the CC crates. I decided to invest some of the coal that I'd received with a cheeky little discount coupon and pick up the Tier 10 US Destroyer Forest Sherman. Shoot, Forest, shoot! Something like that, anyway. This ship is pretty hilarious. This is my first game in it in this account here. And yes, it turned out to be very, very interesting finish to this particular battle. We're in a Tier 10 plus super ship. Brackets Tier 11 close brackets arrangement. The enemy team have a division with a sorry, I've distracted myself by getting into camera shenanigans. There we go, that's the one I wanted. Marvelous. They have a division comprising a Dalana or Dalai Lama and an Annapolis or Pineappolis. So should be quite a good challenge for us. The Sherman is an unusual destroyer in that she's not particularly stealthy, not the worst, but at 6.5, certainly not the best in terms of being hidden. She has a very, very useful hydro arrangement, and I have actually the module in slot 2 to extend the duration of said hydro. I believe it's a couple of minutes I get on it per charge. She has rather peculiar fast-loading torps that kind of just drift out for 16.5 kilometers, and you'd be surprised actually do often end up hitting things where you'd think there's no chance of these torps doing anything useful. Don't sleep on these torps. That's my advice. They are very fiddly to launch, and you've got to be very careful not to turn your ship in towards enemy ships that are approaching. Because with 6.5 kilometer detection, you'll run the risk of getting spotted. And trust me, this ship puts out a lot of firepower very rapidly, and therefore has a bit of a reputation, or I should say, is one of those ships that people then very much enjoy shooting at. It's funny how that works, isn't it? High speed spamming ships. Anyway, we decided to pop up here and try and contest for D. I wasn't actually sure at the time what the concealment of the Dalana was, but my assumption was that even though it's a big old super ship, it'd probably outspot us. We do pick up the Napoli in its smoke there, and because we were close enough to spot it when it fired. The Napoli's heading off. Obviously, we don't want to get into any kind of fight involving the Napoli. The Dalana decided to open up its guns on us, and that'll turn out to be a rather nasty mistake, unfortunately, for that player. They take both the torpedo from us. See, I called it. Silly slow torps, got him. But more importantly, they opened fire and were in full visibility of other ships, even though I was tucked away in my smoke. And their Annapolis division mate was not near enough with a radar to be able to counter me directly. Yes, the Ohio player decided to break with the WoW's battleship player tradition and actually shoot the enemy destroyer in front of us. Well done to them. Thank you very much. So there you go. 1-0. In terms of ships. Right after that, though, their Dememes takes out our U-boat. So we're already back to 1-1 in terms of ship destructions. And yeah, U-boats and submarines in the right hands, very powerful. So losing any ship, really, let alone a sub early on, not the most favourable circumstance. But anyway, it is what it is. So we grab the decap. I decide to stick my butt out of the smoke and say, look at my butt, isn't it fancy? Just to see if I could do a little bit of spotting for our team and get some people, some targets to shoot at. We pick up a Thunderer. I then decide, well, you know what? We've also got a CV who could spot, and maybe that Thunderer will fire. So why don't we just go back in our smoke and do a bit of Pew pew. There's a little bit of selfishness in playing Forest Sherman. It's that kind of a boat. Obviously it doesn't have to be, and it's not intended to be that way, but you can find yourself sometimes being a bit of a cheeky one in the smoke, just going pew pew pew, and then maybe sit there a bit too longer. So anyway, I tried to coach myself in this particular battle, say, okay, let's try and be as useful as we can be. The enemy have a U-boat and a shimakaze, supported by a Montana, Yoshino, and the memes down at the B-cap, and our A-cap with Salem, Petro, Yamagiri, and I guess that's another. Yes, that's where the Yamato is at the beginning of this match. Yes, he actually travels a lot of kilometers in this one, so watch out for that. So I think looking at it, okay, the middle's fairly open. We've got to be careful that we don't get spotted here. I was going to go through that gap in the middle, fairly aggressive, typical kind of approach that I often take in destroyers. But with the planes right above, I think better of it. So we shoot a bunch of them down. Obviously it's a Nahimov, so it doesn't really matter that we shot them down. Hashtag overpowered. Anyway, I decide that rather than going for the risky approach through the middle, we'll sneak up around this rear island, or the second island of this, from our spawn of this group of 4. I still get slapped a little tickle from the Napoli, but thankfully not too many shells. Still did quite a lot of damage, but this ship, when built as I have it, with classic destroyer captain, including the extra health buff, tier 3 captain skill, has 28,400 hit points at the start. Now the ship has no heal, so it's very healthy, but doesn't have any heal or any way of recovering unless you're in one of those fancy buff battles, which are actually quite fun in my opinion and experience. Anyway, moving on to C-cap. We have to keep an eye out for what that Napoli's up to. It looked like he was going away, but I think we'll find in a few moments that the Napoli will actually push in and threaten us at sea. There's also a Conde there, and these super ships hit, like, you know, really, really effective guns typically, and other weaponry. Just very, very powerful ships, as you'd expect. Effectively tier 11. So we've got to be cautious. So I stay at the friendly side of the C-cap, not wanting to get too far ahead, and get hit potentially by either plane spotting and Napoli and Conde, that kind of thing. Here comes the Napoli, as mentioned. Butterfly Beach is what I'll call that. Popping in towards sea, quite an aggressive play. There's a friendly Clausewitz in the middle, trying to be a deterrent. We also have the Petro, Yama, and Conde coming back that way, and the Yamagiri engaged, trying to keep back the enemy down at B. At this point, there's a few ships out there and some plane spotting, so I think I'll smoke up and try to do a little bit of pew pew. Being very wary of Shimakaze torps as well and submarine spotting. I had torped through that gap there just on the off chance, and the Shima, it will turn out, came through the south side of that cap and came into challenge, supported by the Napoli moving up as denoted by my radio pinging around. So luckily, with Hydra running, we were thinking ahead. Okay, better not sit in that smoke, because what do smoke screens do? Funnily enough, they attract fish. So pulled away just in time, and here comes the Napoli. Of course, the Napoli has an additional threat with some nasty slow torpedoes, and there's the first batch of those. And then the planes, the Malta comes in to drop on the Napoli and inadvertently spots the Shimakaze. So I open up the guns immediately, having switched to SAP. The Forest Sherman is armed with HE and SAP shells, and the SAP shells are very, very effective against broadside targets, and in particular against destroyers. They will melt enemy destroyers. You can be, well, I was going to say outgunned, but maybe that's not the right way of putting it. But you can face gunboats, you can face torpedo ships. Your SAP and if you wiggle and do fishtailing with your 2 rear turrets, or you get all 3 of them on at a good angle, your SAP will rip most of the destroyers to pieces pretty rapidly. They will come out of it thinking, boy oh boy oh boy, I didn't see that fight going that way. That combined obviously with your good health pool, it's a good job this ship doesn't have a heal, because it would probably be overpowered at that point. Anyway, the Malta, by the way, at this point has taken up a more aggressive position at C5, just behind that rock. And this will become quite an interesting aspect later on in the battle, as we'll see. The Nahimov has decided to try and push up to another sort of CV defending rock. But I would argue not necessarily the best choice. And certainly won't work out too well for the Nahimov in the end. The Nahimov has moved up to F8 and is trying to defend itself, but there are a couple of battleships and a cruiser up there, as well as our Malta, that decide that maybe it's time for the Nahimov to no longer be a threat. As you can see, it's already down to 10k health. The Malta comes in with AP bombs, hits it for, well, about 9k, quite the chunk. And my particular play at this point is to move in and attack the enemy Shimakaze. The Napoli is being pushed away very, very effectively by our team, putting a lot of pressure. So there's not much left for the Shimakaze to do, and in the end, as I demonstrate here, Shimakaze guns are not to be slept on. They're pretty powerful. It was awkward maneuvering. I stopped off for some extra sandwiches and hot tea on this island at this point. Deliberate, definitely not a mistake. I definitely did notice that I was driving into an island. Anyway, you saw how quickly I melted through that Shimakaze. You know, it was firing its quite capable guns back, but the rate of fire of this ship and the SAP shells, absolutely devastating. Our Clausewitz goes down in the middle of sea, but it had been pushing up fairly aggressively to help us out there, so appreciated. And in the meantime, the Malta has taken its rockets and finished off the Nahimov. Right, what do we do now? We're 3 caps to 1 up, but the Dememes is pushing up on the Yamagiri over at A, and is in the process of radaring it and slapping it about a little bit. A lot of torpedoes coming out from the Yamagiri, as you'd expect in response. But awkward. The good thing for the Yamagiri is that it's managed to get reasonably far away and make it a little bit more difficult for the cruiser. Right, we've managed to get ourselves off of this this little rest stop and back into sea to have a look around. And at this point, I sort of switched style a little bit. We just lost our GK to the Annapolis. They lost their Ohio to our Salem. But at this point, the match is fairly evenly balanced, with the exception of we've held the caps for quite a long time, the cap advantage, and also their Nahimov is down. So I sort of was thinking, okay, on paper, this looks fairly easy, but this match had something about it where ships were being lost fairly evenly, and it had a bit of a feeling about it of like, I don't know, they've got some pretty powerful ships, some great cruisers out there. Cruisers late game, incredibly powerful, and I just had a funny feeling that this one wasn't going to be as easy as it looked on paper perhaps. The Thunder had got itself somewhat isolated, and again the CV advantage is huge at this point. So jolly good show again by the multiplayer, who I gave a +1 because of their choice of targets, focusing on the Nahimov when it was weakened, and just keeping on top of either defending caps or pushing back ships or damaging ships that were in pretty good positions for the enemy team. So we're moving forward towards the decap. Sorry, I'm still getting used to these camera controls. I'll get better over time, but I want to give you guys different angles and more of a play-by-play kind of view rather than just being on the one ship the whole time. So here comes the Thunderer, and I'm deliberating at this point. Should I open up? Should I use the smoke? I've only got one left, and I decide, well, it's not really worth it. We get rid of the Thunderer pretty easily. Good job again by the Malta. And now the question is, what's happening with the caps and these cruisers? The Yamagiri and the Dememes are dancing around in A. The Conde, which is pretty healthy, and the Yoshino pretty healthy, and the Annapolis over half health decide to start pushing up together. And I start thinking, uh-oh, this is a big risk. The Malta is kind of pinned in that position. The Dememes suddenly appears, having turned around that rock very, very quickly, perhaps catching the Yamagiri out with the speed it's done that with. Yamagiri dumps a whole load of torps in the water, panicking. I presume there's another radar in play because he's smoking and still being lit up and shot. And indeed, he detonates. So... maybe a good lesson there for a Yamagiri player in a super ship without a detonation flag. Anyway, the good news is that the Yamagiri player, who was Poseidon, excellent, managed to also torpedo the Dememes. So whilst the Dememes player did a very, very good job in retaining, taking and then retaining the cap, getting rid of the super ship, he unfortunately did eat a torpedo and exit the match. So very, very good for us. But at this point, the remaining ships on the enemy team are still fairly healthy. The Annapolis getting slapped about a little bit. I throw out a bit of cheeky fire on the corner there just to try and agitate the Yoshino and give it something to think about. My torpedoes miss through the middle, but they now have the cap advantage 3-1. There are 4 minutes left in the battle. We're just under 800 points, but they're on 550 thereabouts. So it's getting a little bit closer, and we lose our Yamato. Our Conde then finishes off the Annapolis. Fantastic result on that one, because getting rid of a powerful tier 11 ship with a radar, huge boon for us. And I decide that the Yoshino and the Conde are getting a little bit too close for comfort. Oops, sorry about that. Bit of a crazy zoom moment. And I decide, you know what we'll do? We'll smoke up the Malta. So I give it the old set of smoke screen in chat. And I come along and I put smoke all around the Malta and give him a bit of a path in case he needs to sort of back out of there. Figuring that the Yoshino and or the Conde will be around that corner any moment now. It's 3 minutes left. Points are still significantly in our favor, but we've got one Conde left versus Conde Yoshino, and the Malta is right in front of Yoshino with a whole bunch of torpedoes. I think Conde might have some as well. Forgive me, I don't remember exactly. I've never played that ship. So I'm thinking, okay, we better defend our CV because this is too close to call. Still just under 3 minutes left on the clock. I open up on the Conde with the HE shells, set a fire, just keep pressure. It's having to turn to avoid some torpedoes from a Malta drop, I believe. Then I go for the Yoshino. First of all with the HE shells, just setting fires, adding additional damage over time and pressure. And you see here I'm outside of my smoke, but I have backed up behind it. And because of the plane spotting, he's so close to the Malta, he can be seen by planes most of the time. I'm able to do pew pew. I shoot the Malta a couple of times, just as a friendly gesture, just like high five. Good job. And we get ourselves into a bit of a kerfuffle here, but manage to nudge each other in such a way that neither of us takes torpedoes from Yoshino. Again, I don't believe, I wasn't caught in hydro, so I don't believe the Yoshino had the Malta in hydro, but he certainly, did the reasonable thing, which was firing off some torpedoes in the Malta's general direction, and he, may have hit us if we'd sat in the smoke, that kind of thing. We did have our hydro running again, which probably helped us both. I managed to finish off with the SAP shells, the Yoshino. The Conde then starts driving forward. Charge! Last chance, last ship left if he can kill out. And at this point, we've lost our Conde as well. So it's just myself and now well less than half health, and the Malta. So pretty precarious situation. The Malta starts charging forward, presumably as a sort of a get down Mr. President kind of maneuver. I'm chipping away, I think setting fires and SAP on the Conde, and look at that, even the super ship, he's got me on fire, he's shooting at me, but there you go, Conde down. Heck of a battle. Very fun, really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this replay. That was my first ever battle in this on this account, and just over 2 million credits, 11,648 free XP, battle performance 86868. Couldn't have been a 6-9 in there on the end wargaming. All right, I'll take that up with Chegg. We took 2 caps. We did 9 defended ribbons, bunch of fires and flooding, and killed off a tier 10 and tier 11 ship, and smoked up a carrier. There you go. Good vibes, everybody. Hope you enjoy it. Give it a thumbs up if you do. Appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one.